Please welcome Kristen Clifford, Chief Program Officer of the Alzheimer's Association.
Thank you so much and welcome. The Alzheimer's Association and Matter are hosting today's Alzheimer's Association pitch competition. We are very excited to have you with us today, both in the room in Houston and virtually, for today's global competition to drive innovative solutions to increase cognitive assessment and early detection and diagnosis of dementia within primary care settings. In December, 5 finalists were selected to pitch their solutions to stakeholders today and to receive mentorship from the Alzheimer's Association and Matter to prepare for today's program. The Alzheimer's Association engages with communities on national, state, and local levels to ensure access to quality care and support for all people affected by Alzheimer's and other dementia. We work to ensure that all individuals at every stage of the disease have access to high-quality comprehensive care, including care planning, management, and care coordination. And right now, in today's exciting treatment pipeline timeline, we know that early detection and accurate diagnosis are more important than ever. In 2022, the Alzheimer's Association launched the Innovation Roundtable to identify gaps and drive innovative solutions in dementia detection and care at scale. The Roundtable is inspired by and works in service of all individuals, families, and care partners directly affected by Alzheimer's or other dementia, as well as those at risk for developing the disease. Today's pitch competition is focused on innovative solutions that can advance the Roundtable's first-year priority, to increase early detection in primary care. The Alzheimer's Association and Matter saw a tremendous and very exciting response to the call for proposals, with 48 applications submitted from innovators in 43 cities across 13 countries, as you can see on this slide. As I mentioned earlier, all 5 finalists have received mentorship from both the Alzheimer's Association and Matter to provide feedback on their solutions and prepare them for the main stage today. The winning solution will receive a $15,000 cash prize, along with a 6-month membership to Matter, and the second and audience choice winners will each receive a $5,000 cash prize. But really, today's program is just the beginning. Our hope is that by connecting our community of industry leaders and key decision makers with large healthcare organizations, by leading innovations within the space, we will foster collaboration, spark new conversations, and hopefully spark new partnerships to achieve our ultimate goal of bettering the lives of those living with Alzheimer's disease and related dementia. Joining me as judges today for this final round are Katie Evans, Chief Mission Engagement Officer at the Alzheimer's Association, who's joining us virtually. And then in the room with us today is Dr. Donnie Aga, Chief Medical Officer from Kelsey-Seybold Clinic, and Dr. Joseph Gapp, a physician leader in the Houston medical community. Thank you so much for joining us today. It's now my pleasure to turn things over to Casey Sheridan, Partnership Manager at Matter, to tell you a little more about Matter, give an overview of the format for today, and then get started with our 5 finalists. Thank you.
Thanks, Kristen, and hi, everyone. Like Kristen said, I'm Casey Sheridan. I'm a Partnerships Manager at Matter. For those that aren't familiar with Matter, we're a health tech incubator and corporate innovation accelerator that's headquartered in Chicago. We were founded about 8 years ago on the mission to accelerate the pace of change of healthcare. First, we incubate startups. Since we launched about 8 years ago, we have worked with over 700 healthcare startups across the ecosystem to help them build their business, connect them to customers, and connect them to capital. Collectively, our member organizations have raised over $4 billion to fuel their growth. Second, Matter is a nexus for people who are interested in and passionate about healthcare innovation and transformation. We like to host a lot of events just like this one, some for the broader public, and some are smaller closed-door forums specifically for our member and partner communities. Lastly, we work with large organizations, so think health systems, pharmaceutical companies, payers, providers, associations, to help them build out and achieve their innovation capacities. We were thrilled when the Alzheimer's Association reached out to us to partner with them on this initiative. So thank you so much to Morgan, to Kristen, to Greg, and your entire team for being really such great collaborators. It's been a pleasure working with you all. Now on to how today's program is going to run. So like Kristen said, we have 5 finalists here with us today who are going to come up on stage and deliver their 7-minute presentations to our panel of 4 judges. After each of the presentations, our judges will have 5 collective minutes to ask that presenter questions on their business case and on their solution. After the first 3 pitches, we'll take about a 15-minute break to give you all a chance to get a stretch in. From that, we'll regroup with the remaining 2 pitches, and then we'll give you all a chance to submit your vote for who you would like to walk away with the audience choice winner today. After that, I'm going to introduce our keynote speaker while the judges go ahead and deliberate in an adjoining room. Those 2 items should wrap up at about the same time, and we'll all regroup here, and Morgan from the Alzheimer's Association will come up on stage and introduce our first, second, and audience choice place winners. So, with that, without further ado, let's get started with our first presentation. First up, we have Carla Zaldua from Accessible.
Hello, everybody. First of all, I would like to thank the Alzheimer's Association and Matter Health for inviting us to this event. Well, I'm Carla Zaldua. I'm CEO and co-founder of Accessible. What we do in Accessible, we identify speech biomarkers in order to early detect and monitor mild cognitive impairment. We analyze what is a person saying and how is he or she saying it. Basically, well, mild cognitive impairment, it's underdiagnosed. There's more than two-thirds of the people that suffer mild cognitive impairment are not diagnosed. There's also diverse racial and ethnic groups that are not that are unequally diagnosed. And also, one of the reasons may be because there are subjective tools and that have many limitations. So in Accessible, what we have tried to do, it's built a tool that is easy, objective, and can be easily used by anyone. So how does it work? Basically, what we do with a device with a microphone and internet connection, a person can do our test, our screening test, and their speech is recorded, and it's sent to our cloud, where we analyze 2 types of things. What is he or she saying, the linguistic and semantic part, and the voice features. And in a couple of minutes, we give back a result if that person suffers mild cognitive impairment or early dementia, or is healthy. To build our algorithms, we've done a series of clinical trials where we did in-depth neuropsychological explorations. We also captured the doctor's diagnosis and the participants' speech. So we built our models with the speech of the participants, and we saw how many times did our algorithms say the same as the doctor's diagnosis. And we saw that 90% of the cases, our algorithms said the same as the doctor's diagnosis. No? We had a sensitivity of 90 and a specificity of 89. At present, we have ongoing labeled data sets that are coming to our database. And what is happening with these percentages is that they are remaining constant. We can say that our algorithms are robust. So the patient's journey, I'm going to draw it with a specific real use case that we have in Colombia, Spain, and UK. In primary healthcare, somebody that comes in with a memory complaint, the doctor runs our tests. If it turns out positive, they are redirected for a neurology in-depth exploration. So here, these are ongoing clinical trials that we are involved in, and also different pilots. I would like to highlight the one that we have with the University of Texas of Western. With Dr. Cullum, 20 neuropsychologists are using our tool in order to monitor and screen mild cognitive impairment in a bilingual context, with Hispanic people, with Hispanic-speaking people, and also English-speaking people. I would also like to highlight here, we've got a clinical trial in Europe, in Spain, that what we are doing is we are keeping track of 1,800 people for 3 years. We are recording their speech. And here what we are looking at, it's correlating our speech scorings with different biological biomarkers. That could be, for example, the neuroimage, the CSF, or the blood test. We are trying with our scorings, try to predict what it's going to show, for example, in the neuroimage. And this, lastly, for the International Day of Alzheimer's in Spain, we put up a website, and different stakeholders, the biggest association in Spain, Alzheimer's Association in Spain also supported it. We put up a web app where people could do our tests. And we received more than 10,000 visits, and 1,700 people did our test. It validated like two hypotheses we had. On one side, the ease of use of our tool, and secondly, that there is a social interest in having these types of tools to check the cognitive functions. I don't know where, okay, sorry. So we are a team of 9 people and growing. And basically, well, Javi, this is the advisor. Javi is here as well. Javi and myself, we are the co-founders of Accessible, and we have a really strong team in data science. For different clinical trials, what we do is we have a specific neurologist and neuropsychologist that work with us. Here, as advisors, here I would like to highlight Dr. Davidoff, that he's from the Harvard Medical School, that he joined our advisory board because of his obsession to try to melt down the bottleneck between screening and having an in-depth exploration in neuropsychology. And then Pedro, he's a psychiatrist in Spain, and Pablo and Javi are mathematicians. And lastly, to wrap up, well, in Accessible, what we do is we have a speech biomarkers to early detect mild cognitive impairment and dementia. We have a very accurate screening tool, a screening tool that it takes 60 seconds, that I would like to invite you afterwards if you want a real demo to come and visit us. It's validated in English and Spanish and can be used face-to-face and also remotely. And basically what we are trying to do is have a easy-to-use tool to early detect as soon as possible if somebody is suffering mild cognitive impairment. Thank you.
Great job, Carla. Oh, you can stay on up there for the questions. Yes, yes.
Sorry.
Dr. Aga, Dr. Goth, do you want to start us off?
Yep. I'd like to start the question, and thank you for the presentation. I'm very interested in this area. Where do you think the role of AI is in your technology of voice recognition and being more improving that sensitivity and specificity of your test?
Well, what we've been doing using an AI, and what we've been doing, it's been very difficult, being very paying a lot of attention on building balanced samples in order to use AI and not having it, saying if it depends. For example, if you built an algorithm having all women that have dementia, if it hears a woman, then she has dementia. So what we are doing is being very careful on how are we using AI models.
Thank you.
The question I would have from the practical standpoint, you have with the specificity rate of about 89%, that means you have about a 10 or 11% false positive rate. And that would be very concerning, I think, as a clinician, about what the clinician's going to do when 1 out of 10 people perhaps could have a false positive rate based on your technology. What are you going to do to help with that, and what would you suggest the clinicians to do thereafter in the false positive patient? Okay,
and this specificity, we can also put up the specificity, and the sensibility then would go down. We can customize it if that's a really important thing to detect everybody. We can do that, but it depends on what the clinician wants to prioritize. Okay, so then you will have a lower sensibility.
Question?
I'm sorry, Casey, did you call on me?
Yes, I did. Go ahead when you're ready.
I apologize. Thank you so much for your presentation. I appreciated the examples of some of the additional user validation that you're doing with neurologists and psychiatrists. Are you doing any work with primary care practices or in that setting? And how is your team preparing in terms of looking at barriers to adoption, specifically within primary care settings?
Yep. Well, in what I was talking about in Colombia, maybe I didn't say it, sorry. In Colombia, UK, and Spain, they are using our models in primary care settings. So somebody with a memory complaint comes to the doctor. In the case of Spain, it's public healthcare. In Colombia, it's private healthcare. And in UK, it's the national health system as well. So somebody comes in, they run our test, and if it turns out positive, they are redirected to a neurologist. I'm not sure is that what your question?
On your slide where you were sharing some of the additional studies that you're doing, you're really focused, primarily it looked like working with neurologists. I was wondering if there's any studies that you're doing within the primary care space, and then what additional barriers for scalability and adoption your team is thinking about.
Okay, so that's what we're doing in primary healthcare. And what we are, the adoption, they are quite, at first they are a bit, they don't like it a lot, but afterwards it takes a while, but they are happy using it. And what we are also working at in Spain with a private healthcare insurer, we are running this screening test remotely as well. So our focus is having our tool is an alert system. It's a screening tool. It's not, we don't aim to do in-depth explorations. It's an alert simply.
Thanks, Kristen. Katie, you want to close us out with the last question?
Sure, thank you. Very interesting, and congratulations on all that was presented. I am interested in why voice over eye or hearing.
Well, the eye, it's also a very, I think or solution and other solutions that might look at different, the eye or different other feature, senses can be complementary. Or it's not that it's a one thing solution, but I think that they can complement. And in our case, voice is so easy. You can do it by phone. You can do it. There's not many barriers to analyze voice. So that's and it has a great potential on identifying, early identifying mental health conditions. So that's
Wonderful. Well, that concludes our time for judges, or for questions from judges. Good
Thanks.
job, Carla. Awesome. Okay, next. All right, next up, I would like to welcome Deborah Dahl from AllsPath to the stage. Deborah.
Good afternoon. AllsPath is honored to be here to address the issue of how we can partner with primary care for cognitive assessment and early detection and diagnosis of dementia. It's a very challenging problem as we go forward. I know that you're all aware of the problems in a PCP area. The most obvious problem, you've got a 15-minute visit as you come in with a panel of 2,000 patients. Really tough to spend a lot of time or to even get to know your patients on a regular basis to know when their cognition is changing. The not so obvious challenges that we've run into are that most physicians state that it's important to assess cognitive impairment, yet assessments are conducted with just 50% of the patients. Most physicians also state it's important to diagnose MCI, but once again, only half of those patients are diagnosed. And if they do suspect a problem, then what are you going to do? If you're lucky enough to live in the Houston area, then you refer them to one of the great memory clinics in this area. If you live in rural Texas, or most any place else in the US, and around the world it's even worse, then what? So if you have a memory clinic nearby, it's usually an 8-month wait to get in. I loved one of the conversations we had with a physician who said, we don't have a waiting problem. The patients call, they get an appointment right away. 8 months later, we see them. No waiting problem as we go forward. So where does that leave our patient? 60% of dementia patients don't receive an assessment. 1/3 of dementia patients are misdiagnosed. And for that small percentage of patients that are diagnosed, it's usually 2 to 3 years into their cognitive decline. Early detection? I think not. AllsPath is not the silver bullet. We'd like to be, but we're not. But we can make it easy with a one-step referral to AlzPath to help with your patient population. This is a virtual clinic, if you will, and we're just so fortunate to have a group of nurse practitioners with years and years of experience in dementia care. During the first patient visit, we gather a detailed history, screen for depression, and provide implications of a positive diagnosis of Alzheimer's disease. That rarely happens in many of the clinics as you go forward. We talk through, if you have a positive AD, do you have long-term care insurance? It'll be a little late to get that afterwards, and how can we help you get that? Do you live in California or New Jersey? It's mandatory that we report this to DMV, and you'll get to go in and retake your driver's test. Oh, and by the way, are you a pilot, or do you belong to any other union where a positive dementia diagnosis can help you lose your job? A big problem. So we need people to be aware of what's going on before they step through these tests. During the second visit, we provide a virtual cognitive assessment, and we place that order for a blood draw for p-tau 217. And I'll talk more about that in just a second. One of the exciting things is that the results will be available in about 2 weeks to the patient, not 8 months. In the third visit, results are disclosed, and most importantly, we have a conversation with the patient to find out what's important to them. Perhaps you're interested in a clinical trial, and can we get you in early? How about a memory clinic? Maybe it's not AD, but you do have cognitive impairment. Let's see what we can do in a streamlined fashion to get you in to find out where the problem is and move on that. Are you interested in lifestyle modifications? Because around the world, people have lots of other comorbidities. How can we help you with that to move forward so you can delay cognitive decline? All this happens with a simple one-step referral to AlzPath. No different than you would with a cardiologist or a GI consult or any other consult. Place the consult, you're done. That's the Pathfinder's role. Let's talk briefly about the AlzPath p-tau 217. This is a proprietary novel blood test, which is an accessible and scalable phosphorylated tau, which enables early detection of AD. At this year's CTAD meeting, we shared an assessment of clinical performance of the AlzPath 217 assay, and it showed a 91% likelihood that the assay will accurately identify AD, 91%. The box plot demonstrates a clear distinction between negative patients in the blue box and positive patients in the orange box, with the size of the orange box showing that we've got a nice spectrum of patients, so you can do from preclinical through the severe AD sections. So what does that mean for investors? Well, we have multiple revenue channels to spread risk and increase payment opportunities. And more important, what does this mean for patients? For people with cognitive impairment, whether they be a patient or not. We anticipate performing about 4,500 AlzPath blood tests this year, and our Pathfinders will see about 1,200 patients. We follow that think big, act fast, fix fast, scale quickly model. And with the entry of new disease-modifying treatments, we're going to have to scale quickly everywhere to be able to get the right people into the right drugs as we go forward. We were founded just 3 short years ago, so you may ask, how did we get so far in such a very short period of time? Well, we started with 3 amazing co-founders, Dr. Eric Ryman from Banner Alzheimer's Institute, one of the rock stars of AD, Dr. Venkat Shastri, who's here with me today. He's our CEO, and he's a robotics professor at USC and an entrepreneur, and our board chair, Jerry Stead. Jerry has funded 31 startups in his career with a greater than 87% success rate with valuations exceeding $1 billion. He gets how to do a startup. He's the main funder of many US-based Alzheimer's memory centers, including Banner Alzheimer's Institute, and he's committed to fund AlzPath personally and through his network. We then added a strong team of people with decades of dementia clinical expertise and assay development, including Dr. Andreas Dronim, our CSO, who has more than 30 years of experience in the assay field. To that team, we overlaid our advisory board. You'll see and recognize these are global leaders, the who's who of Alzheimer's research and disease, and each member was intentionally selected for their expertise in research, biomarker development, clinical trials, healthcare economics, and clinical care, all skill sets needed to disrupt the market. AlzPath is ready to be the catalyst to help transform the AD ecosystem by reducing wait times at memory care clinics, aiding in more accurate AD diagnosis, and most importantly, acting as a force multiplier for primary care physicians. Please join AlzPath as we scale quickly to meet the global challenge to increase cognitive assessment and early detection and diagnosis of dementia. Thank you. Questions? And if you ask anything about p-tau, Venkat is here with the answers.
Dr. Aga, Dr. Gath, you can get started.
Go ahead.
I guess the first question I have is, how does it, do you get the p-tau test and then you go into the virtual program, or do you go to virtual? I mean, which one comes first is the first question I would have. And then the second question I have, it sounds like once you get to the virtual program, you're looking at about 3 visits. What are we looking at for adherence and compliance with that when we have trouble getting our people back for a routine visit elsewhere? And if you already have cognitive impairment, how are you going to make sure once you actually go on that path that they're going to come back?
Yep. So the first contact is with one of the pathfinders for that virtual call. One of the things that we've found with our virtual calls is that patients have a tendency to be more compliant with that than with the drive-in to the clinic in person. We have ways that we've set up, just like your clinics have, that say, okay, you've got to call 48 hours from now, you got to call 24 hours from now, 5 minutes from now. The second part is that on the day that we do the cognitive assessment, we also order the p-tau at the same time. So it's not one and then the other, but the two together. We don't disclose that information until we have both pieces of the results in that third call. Okay.
Katie, I saw your hand go up first.
Thank you. Let's fast forward 2 years from now. What does the marketing mix plan look like?
We're excited that we've got some approaches both with the pharma companies because of their new disease-modifying drugs, but more importantly with remote patient monitoring groups that are dealing with the complex chronic patient population. So we're right now closing a deal with a group that has approximately 2,500 patients that have these multiple complex chronic diseases, and they want to know where they are from a dementia perspective. In their analysis of the Medicare data, 25% of those already had a diagnosis of some form of dementia. Don't know what that is or what that means, but they want to know what is it and how can we go forward with that patient population. So we're hoping for just a very direct answer, let's say 15,000 patients next year to run both the blood test and the cognitive assessment. That's a big scale quickly for anybody.
Thanks for your question, Katie. Kristen, we'll go to you next.
Thank you. My question was in a similar vein. I was going to ask, I don't think I heard you share this, Deborah, so my apologies if you did, but I was wondering how many people you serve to date, and how are you currently trying to receive referrals from the primary care practices?
Rather than try to change the entire healthcare ecosystem, we've gone with the traditional fax referral. Yes, that hurts my soul to tell you that. But that's the best approach that we've come up with. So if you've got ideas on how to make that different, we would love to hear those. But that's the plan du jour. And did you have a second part to that question? I'm sorry, I spaced over.
You semi-answered this talking about your goals for patient care in the next year. I was wondering how many people you've served to date.
We are just starting with live patients. We've been working with the research and with the clinic. So in that session, in the p-tau 217 only, we've seen many, many patients, and I'm sorry I don't have the number off the top of my head, but glad to get back to you. We start with our Pathfinder team in June of this year.
And then my last question, if I have time for one more quick question, is at the end of this session of visits, I'm sure there's communication with the interdisciplinary healthcare team. Is there then a referral on to a specialist if this initial referral came from primary care, or just back to the original referrer?
Right now, the groups we're working with would go, the report would go back to primary care, and assuming that this is the approach that primary care practice would like, we'd like to move them in a streamlined fashion to the memory center. And our conversations with the memory center is if we already have a very thorough history by NPs that are dementia experts, if we've got the p-tau, if we've got the cognitive assessment, if all of that is done, that will save us 2 visits with that patient, and we can move right into whatever the next stage is. Is that the answer to your question? No.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Dr. Aga, do you want to close us out with one more question?
Yes. Very good presentation. Thank you. This reminds me of some of the genetic tests that we now do, and one of the most important things on that is the shared decision making, that it's the right thing to do because the results could have consequences. So talk to me about how y'all do the shared decision making before you decide to run the test.
I think that is one of the key differences, and your genetic counseling model is one we've actually based our discussions on. So it is important, and what we've not talked to any memory clinic that has that discussion with the patient ahead of time about, do you have long-term care insurance? You know, where do you work? What do you do? What are your goals for your life? And how will this response fit in so they can make an informed decision going forward? The genetic group has just been a great leader in that field of making sure that before they jump right in with that answer and sign up for 23andMe, that they know what they're getting into.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Great job, Deborah. Next up, we have Jennifer Vilwak from Aroma.
All right, well, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Dr. Jennifer Vilwak, and I'm the CEO and founder for Aroma Sensory Diagnostics and Therapeutics, which is sensory testing for early and actionable dementia diagnosis. And so I'm also an otorhinolaryngologist, which means ear, nose, and throat doctor and expert. So I can tell you with confidence that I know that your nose knows about your brain's health. And what I mean by that is that there's an intimate connection between your sense of smell as well as brain health, and specifically dementia. And when we think about the reason why this might be, it's because of this nose-brain connection. So there are olfactory receptor neurons, which you'll see highlighted in pink in just a second. And these form a direct connection between the nose and the brain. And because of this, we know that olfaction or sense of smell can decrease actually decades before you have the onset of any sort of cognitive symptom, which makes this a great candidate as a functional biomarker for dementia. Oh, and that's the reason why, particularly for things like Alzheimer's disease, where those abnormal proteins first develop and first start depositing in the olfactory bulb, this is why olfaction starts to be impacted so early. And we all know that despite this, dementia is still diagnosed way too late. And when I think about the spectrum of cognition, you know, oftentimes where most diagnoses are made is after that dotted red line. And so this is the time when people have symptoms that can no longer be ignored, but this is simply, you know, too late to effectively intervene. And what this results in is not only untold human suffering in terms of, you know, the stigma as well as things like ageism, it contributes to the fact that we don't really have a lot of effective disease-modifying drugs because your course is unmodifiable at that point in time. And it also contributes to $305 billion in direct care costs per year. At the same time, what we know is that olfaction starts to decline years before the onset of any cognitive symptoms. And at the same time, we also know that we are able to detect those differences. And so this really gives us a critical window to screen and intervene. And at the same time, it gives us objective data too, because olfaction is really important for general health and safety in terms of hazard detection as well. So for the past 5 years, what we've been doing is field testing our aroma test, as well as our associated machine learning algorithms, and scientifically validating them. So most excitingly, in some of the data that you see here, we know that our olfactory phenotypes, or patterns of responses, are very sensitive and accurate for differentiating between normal aging versus cognitive impairment. And when given the more difficult task of differentiating between MCI as well as MCI from dementia, the performance characteristics are conserved. So we're still 100% sensitive and nearly 90% accurate. And just for comparison's sake, as you can see there, in highly controlled settings, the mini mental status exam is only 87%. We've also been doing our due diligence, testing our aroma test itself, and I'll show you some pictures of what that looks like as well, against other objective olfactory tests that exist, and also making sure that our testing and methodology is applicable in a variety of different settings, including differentiating between things like COVID-induced olfactory dysfunction and sinusitis to make sure that the signals that we're getting are specific for those disease states. You know, the scientific merit and rigor of our approach has been vetted in a number of ways. So we recently received a $3.8 million grant from the NIH to study this in a clinical context for the next 5 years, and I'm the PI for that award. We've already successfully filed our provisional patent, which is converted, and we continue to be successful in publishing our papers, which you can see the PubMed IDs there. As well as obtaining additional foundational grants. So I apologize, there's a bit of a delay with our clicker here, but we'll make our way through. And so, you know, as you hear all of this compelling data, you're probably wondering, well, why are there still these gaps in diagnosis? And from my perspective as a clinician in training, it's the 3 T's. It's the training, the tools, and the time. So most folks are not trained as geriatricians, and as a result, studies show that people are simply not confident in their dementia diagnosing skills. Then we add to that the fact that there are a lot of biomarkers are either expensive, non-invasive, or not directly clinically relevant. And as others have mentioned, it's hard to really cram the results of these highly nuanced tests into a 15-minute office visit. And so this is exactly where Aroma comes in to fill these gaps and address those 3 T's. And so we're user-friendly. There's no special training that's needed to complete the olfactory testing. And we designed it to be primary care and at-home setting friendly. It's an all-digital workflow, so it does give us real-time results, which you can incorporate into clinical care, and it's not burdensome to complete. Woo. Woo, okay. So what we have here is our actual olfactory testing, and so we test multiple different scents at different concentrations. That olfactory data is combined with the patient's demographics as well as their medical history, and then our machine learning algorithms are applied. From that, you get that performance information, and you can help people understand their safety risks. We also get a phenotype or a pattern of response, as well as diagnostic predictions. And so when I think about the market opportunity here, the nearest analog is the sensory screening many of us get already, which is vision testing. And so about 110 million tests are performed per year, and about $100 each. We know that about 85% of people want to be screened for dementia, and 44% of those actually present to the primary care office. So that gives us a $411 million clinical care only market per year, ignoring the fact that this could be used as a companion diagnostic to really enhance our ability to treat Alzheimer's and dementia early. There are numerous competitors in terms of other olfactory tests, but we're the only ones that are meant to be, you know, patient-friendly, deployed in a primary care setting with immediate results. Machine learning analysis is applied in a digital workflow, which is important for the efficiency of our solution because it's hard for people to, you know, complete paper tests and also can be hard for folks to interpret those results. You know, the thing I want to focus on here is really the distribution model, which would be prescription only for legal and ethical reasons, but this could easily be incorporated into the annual Medicare wellness visit cognitive screening requirement as well. And then in terms of the leadership team that we have here, you know, we're a diverse and mature team with expertise in research, as well as public health and regulatory affairs, machine learning, analysis, and grants management and entrepreneurship. And we also work in partnership with the University of Kansas, as well as the Associated Alzheimer's Disease Center to really present, you know, a mature team that has the necessary expertise to really continue to take this forward. And so I'd like to conclude just by inviting you, imagine this sort of screening tool in the hands of clinicians and care teams to really leverage what the nose knows for early and actionable dementia diagnosis. Thanks. I'll take any questions you might have.
Katie.
Hi, thank you. I'm interested because my daughter cannot smell, and so I'm interested in what percentage of the population cannot smell. And with this, are they excluded from this?
Yeah, so if you have, a baseline olfactory disorder, this would not directly apply to you. And, the conversation gets a little bit nuanced because some folks, especially with COVID, that's the primary reason why they're not able to smell versus a more congenital absence of sense of smell. But that's certainly part of the screening procedures that we employ before, including folks in this work so that we know that the signal that we're getting is reliable and robust for our purposes.
Kristen, we'll go to you next.
Great. Thank you so much for your presentation. I like that you talked about the 3 T's. So we all know that those are our challenges, barriers that we're trying to overcome here. Can you talk a little bit more about how long the actual olfactory testing piece would take in that office setting, who's performing it, and what type of training do?
I think you finished the question. You froze there for a second. So the actual test itself, it takes about 15 to 20 minutes. There's some branching logic within there because the odorants that you're presented with, the concentration that you're presented with depends on how you performed in the prior round to really allow us to get a good sense of what your olfactory reserve is. In terms of who is able to do it, in the very, very early prototype stages, we had patients self-administering this in the clinic setting. So it's something where I think that it's certainly easy enough to be done in that setting, particularly since our electronic workflow kind of prompts you through it. So our goal is that this is not something that needs to be done by a clinician, but could be done, by an MA or someone at that level preceding an appointment.
Dr. Aga?
Yes, thank you, and appreciate you bringing up the annual wellness exam for Medicare patients. But as you know, there are a ton of things we have to do during that visit. So my challenge to you is, how do you get this less than 5 minutes?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that is where we would really be leveraging our machine learning algorithms. The data that I'm presenting here today is from an expanded research panel, but as we enroll more patients and continue to vet the science, what we're hoping to be able to do is reduce the number of scents and concentrations that are used so that we have a neurocognitive specific screening battery that would be much more abbreviated than the full research version that we're using in a variety of different disease states currently.
Thank you.
Dr. Gath.
I think my final question dovetails on the first one. Between totally normal olfaction and can't smell at all, we've got people that have sinusitis, some COVID damage, some not. How does your sensitivity and specificity equate to that sort of spectrum of people who will be coming in?
Yeah, so those are things that fortunately we're able to correct for or to take into account in our analyses. So in addition to the olfactory test that we do, we also have them complete some questionnaires about their overall health, a couple of which are sinonasal health specific, so that to your point, if they score super high in all these sinus symptoms, we need to optimize them from that standpoint, which has its own separate health benefits, before really leveraging this solution for dementia diagnosis. But that would allow us to kind of pursue 2 paths in tandem, but reserving, using one portion of it for their cognitive clinical care once we've optimized the other things that are going on from a health standpoint.
We do have time for one more question, if any of our judges would like to close us out. If not, that's great too. All right. Well, in that case, great job, Jennifer. Okay, so as promised, we're now going to take about a 15-minute break. So we're going to kick off with Jordan from NeuroTrack at 3:01. We'll see you back here then. All right, everybody, if you can please take your seat, we're going to get started in just 1 minute here. All right, is everyone ready? Okay, welcome back. So we have 2 remaining pitches. First up is Jordan from NeuroTrack.
So I'm Jordan Glenn, Chief Science Officer at NeuroTrack. I'd like you to meet Francois, former CEO, speaks 5 languages, and he's my wife's grandfather. A few years ago, we flew to Belo Horizonte down in Brazil to visit. We get to the house, she runs up to him, eyes sparkling, "Bopi, Bopi, Bopi." And he looks at her quizzically, and he says, "Hola, mi nome é Francois, prazer em conhecer você." "Hello, my name is Francois, it's nice to meet you." Now, I don't have to tell you how that feels. This conversation's happening 50 million times across the United States, and by 2050, it'll happen over 150 million times across the globe. We have a very significant problem with underdiagnosis of cognition in the United States. Access to cognitive testing is scarce, it's hard to get access to. Traditional cognitive tests are incredibly biased to your background, your culture, your race, ethnicity, education, you name it. We also know that diagnosis is significantly delayed. We've talked about it multiple times today due to long wait times and even getting access to the care you need. And so a much more scalable model is needed to be able to provide people access to care at the front lines with the PCPs, to be able to help them understand, how do I get the care I need? Do I need a care? Do I have an issue, yes or no? And that's why NeuroTrack exists today. We focus on starting with assessment. Easy, simple, baseline scoring and establishment of cognitive status for people right there in the PCP's clinic. Monitoring over time to help them understand their long-term trajectory and how they're doing over time. And then behavioral intervention for those who need it through modifiable risk factors related to cognition. We start with screening. In just 3 minutes, we can give somebody a baseline assessment of their cognitive status. It doesn't require any training. It's completely objective, meaning a tech, an MA, a nurse can handle that administration, have the score ready for the physician to be able to practice at the top of their license, so that way they can actually make decisions and diagnoses without having to spend the time doing the test administration. And it's accurate. We have very high sensitivity and specificity. If you look at the top right, 91% sensitivity, 92% specificity for distinguishing healthy from those with MCI. And then 100% sensitivity and 92% specificity when comparing those that are healthy to those who have diagnosable Alzheimer's disease. The results are calculated immediately. They're easy to interpret for the clinician. In fact, in-clinic testing time takes about 3 minutes and 15 seconds. These are real data from health systems that we've gone live with. The patient intake phase, the time it actually takes the MA, the tech, the nurse to administer the test, takes 34 seconds. That's all the time it actually takes them to administer this. The rest is self-guided by the user, by the patient. It takes them about 41 seconds to get through instructions. It's a timed 2-minute testing phase. And only 5 out of 100 patients actually have to repeat the instructions. We've modified it, we've adapted it, we've made it very accessible and easy to understand for this population. We also have a very big focus on health equity and inclusion. I mentioned earlier that these traditional cognitive tests are very biased to things like education, race, ethnicity, you name it. And so we use culturally agnostic symbols and numbers, really ameliorating and removing those issues. And we've tested this multiple times across the globe. So a 65-year-old woman in Japan is going to score the same as a 65-year-old woman in Tunisia, Brazil, United States, you name it. We also will provide the test in multiple languages. Cognitive assessment is scary. And simply being able to take a test in your native tongue is very valuable, and it can help remove just some of that anxiety associated with cognitive testing. Cognitive screening is required as part of the annual Medicare wellness visits. And we've mentioned a couple times, those visits, the system we went live with this week, their AWVs are 20 minutes long. So doing even a 7 to 10 to 15-minute test it's not appropriate. It's not acceptable for these clinics. They have to do something quick. They have to do something easy to be able to even bill for that visit appropriately. It also risk adjusts. So we know these capitated health systems are capturing maybe 0.5% to 1.5% of their population, when really those with cognitive issues are about 8 to 9%. For every 1% we pull out of a 100,000 person population, you're looking at an additional $3 million in revenue annually. So you have two different models in which you can actually generate revenue from just screening at scale with these populations. We follow up with our intervention program. So we focus on modifiable risk factors, things like exercise, diet, sleep, stress, social engagement, cognitive interaction. We pair the patients with a human health coach to put together personalized programs to help them understand their long-term trajectory and what they can do about it. And it works. We published data back in 2017 from a one-year study. We see 95% engagement over that one-year period, a 7% improvement in overall cognition, as well as significant improvements in measures of anxiety and depression measured by the PHQ-9 and the GAD-7. We received a $3.5 million grant from the NIA to run a full 2-year study in combination with the University of Arkansas, and we're collecting that 2-year time point actually starting right now. And we're seeing very, very similar results in both our educational group as well as our coaching group when it comes to how we can move the needle on cognition over time. It's also proven commercially. So working with one of our partners, we see 63% of users increase overall cognition, 80% reducing anxiety, 71% improving overall health, with a 95% satisfaction rate from the people in our program. So we've been able to transition this from the scientific world to the real world as well. We focus very heavily on clinical evidence. We've had 22 papers published that span our testing platform all the way through our intervention. We are a Class 2 medical device registered with the FDA. We do research with both industry and academic entities. And we are right now focusing on turning this into not just an in-clinic model, but a remote model as well. We've had a number of our systems we work with say, I want to be able to test people before they come in the clinic, and we're going to be launching that in about 6 months. Our team is very well primed to succeed. So not only is almost every single person at our company been touched by cognitive decline, whether it's a loved one, a family member, a friend, my story itself. So there's a huge passion in what we do, but we also understand healthcare. There's how healthcare is supposed to work, and then there's how healthcare works. There's where do you put the Post-it note? Oh, it fell off. Oh, it's in the trash can. Oh, let me get it back out again because I forgot the person's age. Understanding how these clinics work, understanding how to integrate within clinical workflows and not trying to change clinical workflows to work with our tool. And so it's very, very important that we focus on that concept as well. We were too late to help Francois, but we are not too late to help everyone else. Thank you.
Great job, Jordan.
Questions?
Who would like to kick us off? Katie? Nope. Dr. Gath? Nope. Go ahead.
How about vision impaired people? Do they have any access to this in any way?
Yeah, it's a good question. So we tell everyone if they wear glasses to wear their glasses during the test. The two real exclusion factors to this would be major tremors, Parkinson's disease, early Parkinson's, things like that, where you're at, because you're using it's haptic, so you have to have used your modalities, and people who are blind. And so in those cases, clinics will revert to whatever they were traditionally using in a verbal environment. But that only happens, I think in our data so far, we only see that in about 3% of people that come in, so it's a pretty nuanced factor.
Katie, would you like to go next?
Yes, thank you. Would you be able to integrate the data in with the electronic health records?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have done that. We do that now. Whenever we run pilots, we don't go through that process just because it takes so long. So we will provision our own devices for pilots. When we're transitioning from pilots to full go lives, we do integration. The system will usually procure their own devices to do the assessment. We also take that time to integrate into the EHR. So Athena, Epic, those are the two we've done mainly. And then I think we have one with Cerner who's coming up. But those Epic and Athena are the main ones we've done so far.
Yeah, quick question. Outstanding presentation, by the way. That was very good. Kind of meets the things we're looking for in primary care, something quick and easy. My question is, it seemed like, at least by the visual presentation, that this is done like on an iPad or a device. Is it, are you able to get around that barrier for cost to like tear sheets or something else that's not requiring tactile or a iPad?
Yeah, so we can use it on any tablet. So it doesn't have to be iPads are expensive. It does not have to be an iPad. It can be a generic Android tablet, which are significantly lower the cost. And generally, when we do go lives, we will handle the cost of the devices for the system. They just have to integrate it into their own tech. So the cost of the iPad or the tablet is so minimal. It's the software that really is the most important factor.
Thank you.
And I have it on a tablet I'll have it in the other room. So if anybody wants to see it and play with it, compete in cognition, by all means, go for it.
All right, next up, Kristen.
Thank you. Wonderful presentation. I do have some flickering power, so I'm just going to keep smiling because I've heard that my face is freezing in some terrible ways. I just wanted to understand a little bit more around the process for the connection to the health coaching. So I understand the screening tool. At that point, if you were in clinic and you've received the screening tool, is then the option presented via the tool, via the clinician, and how does that information between the health coach and the patient then get shared back to the physician group?
Man, that is a question we are actively working to solve. So there's a couple of ways. I'll answer it in a couple of different ways. So there's the billing for the testing makes sense. It's there. It's easy to understand. We're still trying to figure it out on the intervention side. So right now, what tends to happen is, the patient could get a handout. There's a QR code. They can scan the QR code, and then they can go interact separately on their own from that with that process. It's not easy. It's clearly hard to scale, and not everybody wants to go through that process. So what we're actively doing, and I mentioned a little bit earlier that in our study we're running now, we're seeing those getting the health education materials as well as the coaching, both seeing levels of increase. So we are going to be in the next few months launching a self-serve educational component, which will be free for our systems that use the software, so we can remove the billing headaches associated with it. There's a lot of people who want just self-serve and don't want to work with a coach, and then they get it just automatically when they choose to purchase the software. We're really focusing on trying to simplify that process. We realize the coaching stuff it's hard, it's difficult. Some people do need it, but we really need to make sure that we're lowering that barrier for patients, and that's one of the things that we're working on launching in the next few months.
Thank you.
Any other questions from the judges?
Yeah, I do have one more question. Can you go into a little bit more detail on the risk adjustment side and how it helps with that?
Yeah, for sure. So, and there's usually someone here that would be able to answer that better than I. If you're an at-risk system, and I'm going to say this, a lot of people here already understand what this means, you get X amount of money per year to care for a patient. If they get that Alzheimer's diagnosis slapped on them, there's a significant amount more money that comes in per patient for them to be able to, work within that system. And so I mentioned right now, patients aren't getting screened at scale. And so they might be getting 0.5%, 1.5% of that population, and there is a massive gap between how much that they have and what there is. So just being able to pick up a few percentage, you don't even have to get the whole population, just being able to pick up a few percentage points equates to millions of dollars a year in revenue for these capitated systems. And so being able to make it objective, fast, easy, scalable, allows us to now go to create a scalable model where they can actually do this throughout the system, as opposed to, I don't want to do it, I don't like cognitive testing, the MA is not trained in it, I did it wrong, I got to go redo it, all those things that tend to happen now.
All right. Great job, Jordan.
Thank you all.
Okay, next up, we have our fifth and final pitch of the day. Randall Williams from WellSed.
Thanks, Casey and Matter and the Alzheimer's Association. WellSed is the industry leader in the emerging field called age tech. We're excited to share how our patented and in-market solution is actually helping older adults get the support that they need to stay independent in their own homes for as long as possible, and how it's enabling the earliest detection and diagnosis of dementia currently available in primary care. WellSed's mission is to improve the coordinated support of individuals at risk for their loss of their independence. We deploy clinical-grade cognitive and functional assessments to older adults in their own homes, leveraging consumer technologies such as Amazon's Alexa and Google Assistant devices. Caregivers use the solution to support the needs of over 14,000 older adults as part of our direct-to-consumer and insurance contracts. We give clinicians comprehensive cognitive evaluations and functional status data currently available only through inconvenient, in-person specialized testing so that they can guide care and referrals. Are we working here? There we go. 40% of individuals who need assisted living or long-term care support suffer from cognitive decline. Our family faced this challenge when my mother-in-law Bev's memory began to fail. And of course, this is devastating for patients, but emotional and financial burdens to families and society are enormous. We've heard some of the numbers quoted, well north of $200 billion annually. And this is a growing global problem, as you know. Pharmacotherapies and lifestyle interventions are holding promise to impact this problem, and that's the good news. But the challenge remains. To prevent further decline, treatment has to start early, and that means detecting cognitive impairment as early as possible in order to help. Primary care clinicians provide the bulk of care to those at risk. Screening tools are readily available in EHRs, and reimbursement incentives support their use, yet only half of people with dementia are diagnosed. And as you've heard, for those that are, it may be 2 to 3 years after clinical symptoms have begun, at a time when it's well after the battle has been lost for independence. Why is that? Primary care faces a scalability problem, constrained by availability of personnel, time, and competing priorities. What's needed are inexpensive tools that can be easily deployed to detect the earliest stages of cognitive decline while creating minimal disruption to primary care's already overwhelmed practices. Our solution identifies cognitive impairment well before an individual typically seeks medical attention. That means before they've presented to the primary care office. And our operational model supports large-scale expansion of screening without any incremental burden to the provider. How is that? Well, Better Every Day leverages simple-to-use in-home consumer technologies costing $30 to $70 or less, equipped with scientifically validated NIH gold standard cognitive and functional assessments. Not only do we detect and diagnose dementia, but we also are able to use our AI algorithms to predict future decline. Our well-being programs are designed to support older adults and are highly engaging. Seniors love the simple and more natural way that voice-based technologies work. As a matter of fact, older adults are one of the largest and fastest adopting groups. Over 30% have already purchased a smart speaker and use them to find information, set reminders, be entertained, stay on top of news, weather, and local events, and keep in touch with family and friends. And over 60% of them use their smart speakers at least daily. Well, we bring comprehensive neuropsych testing directly to those older adults in their homes. Our HIPAA-compliant results are easily shared with the user's primary care physicians for their further decision-making. The scientific validity and clinical familiarity of the assessments increases physician acceptance and expands primary care capacity. Testing is already done before patients hit the office. Participants interact with their own virtual well-being coach, with 90% of them doing so at least 5 times a week. Family and friends stay informed with daily alerts and monthly well-being reports through WellSed's Caring Companion app. I'm so sorry. Our assessments lead to early identification of concerns and provide important contextual insights to the caregiver at risk factors that might contribute to or worsen cognitive decline, such as hearing loss, social isolation, or sleep challenges are identified, and areas where cognitive decline places them at increased risk, such as driving challenges, nutritional issues, physical or financial safety, and medication behaviors are also evaluated. Assessments are completed without additional travel or cost burden to patients or to clinicians, and they don't take up precious clinician time or resources. Referrals for additional testing or services can be timelier as a result, and family and loved ones are in the loop early on, which means that communication burdens for clinicians go down. Well, we're continuing to build on our predictive algorithms, currently evaluating voice biomarkers as potential enhancements. We're building APIs to allow EHRs to directly consume our reports. And we're currently completing 2 NIH-funded research projects validating our outcomes with insurance clients. Later this year, we'll begin an FDA approval process. We hope to integrate our platform with service providers, such as meal delivery, transportation, and home modification services. And we're eager to partner with stakeholders to build awareness and increase adoption as we plan for growth funding later this year. WellSed is founded by a team of medical professionals and experienced entrepreneurs. I'm a Johns Hopkins trained physician and a serial digital health entrepreneur, having built one of the nation's first remote patient monitoring companies. I hold several patents and am a serial national grant recipient. I've also advised the Obama and Bush administration on healthcare matters. My colleague Michael Taylor with us today is a seasoned population health and machine learning executive with over 20 years in the field. Most recently, he was the managing director of IBM Watson, where he was responsible for Watson Health's global provider business. And our scientific advisors include industry well-known experts in geriatrics, dementia and screening and diagnostic tool development, neuropsych assessments, and large-scale systems change. We're delighted to share more about our product at this afternoon's reception, or if you're not with us in person, please visit us at www.wellsed.ai. Thank you.
All right, great job, Randall. We will take questions. Dr. Gath or Dr. Ergo, do you want to start us off this time?
Yeah, thank you. Excellent presentation. I guess I'm a little bit confused of where the screening happens. Can you describe that workflow?
Yeah.
Is it the home smart device does the screening, or how does that happen?
Yeah, thank you very much. This all happens up front of a clinician visit and encounter with the patient in their home using a smart device, whether that's a smart speaker or display, which is the typical use, or they may also access it using a smartphone, even a smart TV if they wish. The screening is actually more comprehensive than screening. It's actually full stage NIH gold standard neuropsych testing, and it occurs over a 6-month cycle. One test, once a week, over 6 months. It's sprinkled in with assessments for functional status, nutritional status, safety and security status, many other domains and dimensions of essentially well-being and independence.
Okay, thank you. That's very helpful.
Many of the patients I care for, unfortunately, don't have smart home platforms,
Yes.
especially in communities of color that we're realizing now. And I guess what is the minimum criteria
Yes.
necessary? I mean, can you just have a cell phone and be able to use your services versus having Google and all these other things?
Yeah, because cognitive neuropsych assessments are comprehensive, they require more than just an interaction through a voice dialogue. And so while we can host this on a smartphone, it's done through a voice-activated app on the smartphone, an Amazon Alexa app or a Google Assistant app. So that's really the minimum. Within the home setting, again, these are $30 devices, so it's very inexpensive. But in that constraint, you do have to have Wi-Fi access in the home.
Kristen, would you like to go next?
Sure. Thank you so much for your presentation. Adding on to the question around the screening workflow, I'm just wondering what your approach is to get this in the hands of the public. Is the thinking that clinicians are telling all of their patients that they should be accessing this? Is it that there's broader public support and this is kind of addressing stigma and awareness and people are talking to their family members about implementing this prior to a clinician visit?
Yeah, it's another great question, and it's just the opposite of the primary care physician having to be responsible for making one more referral or do one more test or take up more time for their staff in the office. This actually drives the results from the patient and their family to the clinician for their attention and subsequent referral. And the way we do that is by working directly to consumers and also through insurance carriers, because they're the ones who are caring the most about the costs of the loss of independence. If you think about it, if you lose your independence, you've lost everything. And so consumers directly sign up for this, as do family members and loved ones, as well as insurance carriers who are looking, again, to avoid that individual's loss of independence. So our channel, if you will, to distribute this is going directly to consumers and through insurance carriers and other parties as third-party sponsors for the programming.
Katie.
So I understand you are with the device companies and Amazon specifically. Do you know about the Alexa Together platform?
I'm having trouble connecting.
We're device agnostic, so we are able to deliver these cognitive assessments on any smart speaker or smart display device technologies. So those include, as you know, Amazon, Google, Samsung, Apple has their own platform as well, and we work with all those. And in terms of the other question, which was, I apologize, go back to the other part of your question.
If I say her name, we're going to call her Barbara.
Amazon Together. Yes. So
Yes.
we compete with PERS systems, or emergency response alert systems. And Amazon, as you may know, has come out with a competitive offering to that emergency response approach, where you can use an Alexa device to notify your family, for example, if you have an emergency. While we do that, and we do support that, our use case is much, much broader than that. If you think about it, we're capturing daily interaction with the senior around their well-being status, each of the dimensions of risk, and being able to profile that risk over time and help the family members and them get the supportive digital coaching and other services to be able to keep them independent.
All right, that concludes our questions for Well Said. Great job, Randall. All right, great job to our 5 finalists and judges. Thank you all for your insightful questions. All right, before I go ahead and introduce our keynote speaker, I'm going to give you all a chance to go ahead and submit your choice, or your vote rather, for the Audience Choice Prize today. So if you go ahead and follow that QR code, it'll take you to our online survey where you will be able to select one person that you can vote for. If for some reason your camera can't capture that from where you're sitting in the room, you'll see in the center of your tables, there are also some QR codes there. And for our virtual listeners, you can also participate. My colleague just dropped the online survey link in the YouTube chat. The survey will be open for about 15 minutes, so go ahead and get your votes in. If you're having any issues with it, my colleague Emma at the back of the room, who's raising her hand now, can help you get to where you need to go. All right. So with that, I would like to introduce our keynote speaker for today, who is Dr. Jennifer Arnouville, to the virtual stage. She is stuck in Fort Worth as well because of the winter storm. Dr. Arnouville is a board-certified family medicine geriatrician who focuses on preventative care and special health issues that older adults face. Dr. Arnouville serves as a regional associate medical director for WellMed Medical Management, which is a division of Optum. There, she primarily focuses on how to leverage the power of health systems and population health to promote better health for older adults and other high-risk populations. Today, Dr. Arnouville will be discussing the challenge of early dementia diagnosis within primary care settings. All right, so Dr. Arnouville, we'll let you take it away.
Well, and thank you so much for having me. I wish I could be there with you all today. I'm just so inspired, and thank you all for putting your hearts and minds and passion towards the early diagnosis and treatment, and hopefully one day cure of this disease. Just so you know a little bit about me, my main thing for the past 12 years has been primary care geriatrics. And so I struggle every day with the challenge of catching every patient as soon as possible. And so I wanted to talk to you all some about that challenge. And I think I won't have necessarily solutions for you, but that's your job. So I would like to tell you a story about a special patient. His name is Louis. He's a 79-year-old male with an interesting background. He grew up poor in Southwest Louisiana, one of 7 children, but he was smart and he had a dream to go to college. So despite being pulled out of school all through his elementary and high school years to do work when the family needed it, at the age of 18, he hitchhiked to Louisiana Tech University with $20 in his pocket and managed to finagle his way into a dorm room and was successful in getting his chemical engineering degree. He formed his own fiberglass business and did all of the mental acrobatics that engineers do for many years successfully and supporting his family. About 5 to 7 years ago, Louis started to have more difficulty with some of those mental acrobatics, and it became increasingly evident to his family that he was starting to struggle. Now, living in a rural area, Louis did not ever undergo any type of cognitive screening. And by the time it had become especially evident to his family that something serious was going on, Louis had lost the insight to really even have a willingness to undergo any type of formal testing. Now, fortunately for Louis, his daughter is a geriatrician. So that is actually me. And even though his case did not go in the way that even I, being a physician daughter, would have preferred for him, I think this illustrates the realities that patients and families deal with, and why innovation is so sorely needed. Now, I do want to reassure you that Louis has given his consent for me to share his story, and he is now currently doing pretty well on some of the older dementia medications that we have. He's living his best life in his home with his wife and the love of his life, his little poodle Sheba, who I think is the worst poodle to have ever lived, but he's wrapped around her finger. So why, even when you have a geriatrician for a daughter, can't we diagnose this early, especially with the impact of this disease? So I can't resist sharing some data with you. The World Health Organization has identified dementia as a health priority and emergency. And you can see currently the 7th leading cause of death and one of the most expensive and prevalent diseases in the world. So this was a seminal study spanning 6 years, the health and retirement study, and quite interestingly, it underscored the under-recognition and under-diagnosis of dementia. So participants had cognitive screening assessed via telephone, and whenever they met criteria for dementia, they were then asked if they had such a diagnosis, and a startling 91% did not identify any diagnosis of Alzheimer's disease or dementia. Now, reassuringly, whenever caregivers and family members were gotten on the phone to confirm the answer, that number did decline to 75%, but still striking the number of individuals with evident cognitive impairment who are not being diagnosed. And this is thought to parallel the rates that are likely going on in the country, and then with even increased levels in other parts of the world. There are a number of barriers throughout all participants in this equation. So physician factors can include things like educational barriers. Many, especially primary care physicians, do not feel like they have received in-depth training on dementia diagnosis and treatment. Both physicians and patients and families often come with their own biases. Many people have felt up to now that dementia was a disease without options, and so physicians and medical providers can be fearful of handing such a diagnosis to patients and families without a solution. On the patient and caregiver side, people often feel like maybe this is just normal aging. Access to care is a major issue. There's only one geriatrician for every 10,000 older people in the country. And neurology is another very limited resource that is particularly limited in rural areas. At the system level, hospitals, health systems, this is a disease that has been under-resourced. It certainly doesn't come with attached revenue, such as surgical issues may have. And then there's been a general lack of clear guidelines that now, fortunately, the Alzheimer's Association and other organizations are seeking to address. I will say, with the lack of specialists in dementia care and diagnosis, primary care physicians really do want to rise to the occasion. So why don't we? You know, the Medicare annual wellness visit actually requires cognitive screening as part of the visit. Now, that has not been broken down into something very specific, but we do have a number of options. And as you can see, the cognitive screening test, depending on the depth of the test, can range anywhere from 2 to 15 minutes to administer. So why don't we do that when we have such an impactful disease? One such study made all primary care physicians feel particularly validated this past year. So a group of researchers looked at how much time does it really take a primary care physician with an average number of patients on their panel to administer all guideline recommended preventative care, chronic disease management, and acute care. And what they found is that to do it and do it right and follow the appropriate guidelines, give the appropriate amount of counseling and education to the patients, that physicians would need more than a day's worth of the hours in a single day to take proper care of their patients on a daily basis. Now, the good news is that with team-based care, and that includes nutritionists, counselors, and medical staff such as RNs and medical assistants, that could be reduced to a more manageable just under 10 hours per day. Still not optimal, but you know, a better. What I will say is the reality is that primary care physicians don't generally have robust teams like this in place, and they do the best they can with a partial team. And so that is why, despite the urgency of the diagnosis and the disease and the sincere desire for primary care physicians to heed the call, it's an imperfect process at present. But it's still a worthy goal and something worth pursuing. There are many benefits to early diagnosis of dementia. It probably goes without saying. But especially with the advent of potentially disease-modifying medications in the newer monoclonal antibody therapies, early diagnosis also means that patients can receive treatment sooner. They're given the opportunity to engage in other activities that may slow progress and maintain independence. These include cognitive and speech therapy, modification of diet and exercise, clinical trial participation in particular can be a real opportunity for patients with more options the earlier the disease is recognized. Patients and families then have the opportunity to address important issues like advanced care planning and safety, all outside of the panic of an emergency. But most importantly, I think what families are given is the gift of time. And that is why this pursuit is so noble. And again, I'm just so impressed with the people putting their minds and efforts to this worthy cause today. So patients and families have the opportunity to make amends. People get the chance to pursue those bucket list items. And in the case of my dad and in so many other families, I have the chance to treasure every day and know that every good day is special and finite. I want to tell you a little bit about what my organization is doing. And this is in partnership with the Alzheimer's Association. So as mentioned, I work for a company called WellMed Medical Management. We are over 26,000 physicians and clinicians strong, serving over 2 million patients. Our main footprints are in Texas and Florida, and we do have some fingers extending into New Mexico. And as of 2020, I'm very proud to say that we initiated cognitive screening for all of our Medicare patients in the context of their annual wellness visit. And so we have well over a million patients who undergo mandatory either mini-cog or SLUMS cognitive screening. So this is just a step in the right direction. But once it was tied to the clinician performance measures, our patients started to have this as a reliable and evidence-based part of their Medicare annual wellness visit. So I'd like to just finish up with a couple of stories for you, and not a family member this time, so spoiler alert. These actually represent 2 real patients of mine, and I want to just tell you about them. So the first patient I'd like to tell you about, I have called her Mrs. A. And Mrs. A came to me a few years ago. She was my last patient of the day. It was the first time I was ever meeting her. And my medical assistant came into my office and said, "Doc, you're very lucky. The end of the day is going to be a breeze. This is a lovely lady. She takes no medications and has no medical history." And so, breathing a sigh of relief for what I'm pretty sure I remember was a Friday, I went into the room and started to get to know the patient. There was a daughter in the room with her, and the patient did indeed confirm to me that she was wonderful and had no medical issues, no medications, and she really didn't know why she was there. As we started to visit more, it became clear that there were some incongruities in her story and the visual cues I was picking up in the room. For one thing, her daughter looked a little bit like a deer in the headlights. And I started to notice that the patient, even though she was a very attractive lady, and you could tell that she was someone who liked to have a nice appearance, I noticed that her clothes were fitting a little large on her. She had her nails were a little unkept with some dirt underneath. She had a little bit of crusting around her eyes. And so I started to delve a little deeper. As the story began to unfold, it became more obvious that she actually had a lot going on. So she had been living independently in South Texas, and dementia had been taking hold. She actually had diabetes and was on insulin therapy and had quit taking all of her medicines. This had caused her to lose a lot of weight, resulting in the loose clothing I witnessed. And it really had to come to a head where she became very ill and weak, so that family members were alerted, because as you can imagine, just like she was telling me, every time her family called, she was telling them that the world was hunky-dory as well. So this patient, unfortunately, did not have the cognitive screening. She did have the benefit of a supportive family, but one has to wonder if she had been screened a little earlier, if she could have lived independently a little longer, or maybe at least in her own home with a bit more support. She is doing well today, living with family. So I'll just give you that bit of follow-up. And now I'd like to pivot to a patient that I'm going to call Mrs. Z. So another real-life patient. Mrs. Z had been a long-standing patient of mine, and she had come in for her Medicare annual wellness visit, and she had a cognitive screening, including the mini-cog test, that was normal. But it did spur an important conversation. So Mrs. C shared with me that she was not having any issues with performing her home care, self-care, daily activities, but that she did feel that she was starting to change a little bit with regards to her mental acuity. She also shared with me that she had a family history of dementia in her mother, and that was a major concern to her. So after some discussion, we decided to have her participate in the AHEAD study. So in Fort Worth, Texas, we are lucky to have a site for this study. And as part of that study, she was able to undergo neuropsychological assessment, as well as MRI of the brain, amyloid PET scan, and lab testing to rule out other signs of cognitive impairment. The much more in-depth neuropsychological testing did unearth some significant cognitive changes, and her PET amyloid scan did show that she had amyloid plaque on her brain. So while she still met technical criteria for mild cognitive impairment, we agreed that this is likely to be the very, very pre-dementia stages of Alzheimer's disease. Because of her participation in the study, and really because of the conversation that cognitive screening spurred, she is now in a double-blinded continuation of the AHEAD study, where she may or may not be receiving monoclonal antibody infusion. Now, she reports that she is very glad we had the conversation. And although she can't say whether or not she's on the actual drug, she feels pretty confident that she's receiving the treatment and feels that her cognitive issues, at least for the moment, have resolved. So why on earth, whenever I am making the case for early dementia detection and screening, would I bring to you 2 patients who did not benefit from or did not have cognitive screening or did not have a positive cognitive screening? Well, it's actually just to underscore the point that while we will have a winning innovator today, whom I send my personal congratulations, that we need everybody. Our solutions for finding dementia early so that it can be treated as early as possible must be adaptable. It must address patients where they are at any age or stage. It must be affordable, and it must be variable. So I would just say that anyone who is innovating to catch dementia and Alzheimer's early is a hero and a winner, and I encourage you to push forward undeterred in this fight that I'm in with you. So thank you so much for having me, and congratulations to you all.
All right, thank you, Dr. Arnouville, for an exceptional presentation, and I second her that all of the innovators and everyone in this room are heroes. And at this time, the judges are finishing up their deliberations, so if you're in the room, feel free to hang around and talk amongst yourselves. If you're virtual, just hang tight, and the judges will be back, and we will be announcing results shortly. Thank you.
Okay, the moment has arrived. So let's go ahead and get reseated here in the room, and we will wrap this up. So I'm Morgan Davin with the Alzheimer's Association. Thank you all so much. First of all, thank you, Dr. Arnouville, for your keynote today. And a special thank you to everyone who has been involved in this pitch competition, our review and selection committee, our innovation roundtable members who really drove the focus area and the challenge for this pitch competition, for our mentors and especially for our finalists and our judges. So it was really wonderful working with all of you. Now, as a reminder, all 5 of our finalists today received coaching from Matter and one-on-one mentorship from the Alzheimer's Association, and we will continue our conversations with all of you to see how we can best support you moving forward. Now, it's my pleasure to announce the winners of today's pitch competition. Our audience choice winner, who will receive a $5,000 cash prize, is Aroma. So congratulations, Jennifer. Our second place winner, who will also receive a $5,000 cash prize, is Allspath. Congratulations, Deb. And finally, our first place winner, who will receive a $15,000 cash prize and a 6-month membership to Matter, is NeuroTrack. Jordan, please come on up.
Congrats.
Thank you so much. Yeah, congratulations. Great, thank you. Congratulations. Thank you. All right. Thank you, everyone. Thank you again for joining us today, whether you were here in person or online, and have a great day. Thanks again.